So my name is Tiina Lehto-Lundén, and I'm working as a postdoctoral researcher in social work in Finland, in the University of Jyväskylä, as you said. And currently I'm working in a research project called LATU, where we are interested on child and family services, and especially on interventions called support person and support family. This whole research is funded by the Finnish Ministry of Social Affairs and Health. And now I'm visiting researcher in the University of Lund in Sweden, and that is how we got acquainted with Azer. So thank you so much for inviting me to this discussion.
Yes, perfect. Thank you very much, Ina. Yeah, we have talked about your research some times ago, but on this channel, I usually come up with very interesting talks for laymen. I mean, there are a lot of students or a lot of young researchers might be watching this YouTube. So that's why I thought that we should talk it on a public forum. Yeah. Okay, so I will begin with my first question, and that is relevant to your research on sport person. What is a sport person or sport family in general, and how do you conceptualize this concept in your study?
Yes, I think we definitely should start for me explaining how and what these two interventions are about. And it's going to be a long talk, so lay back. But yeah, these two are really commonly used services in Finland and also in Sweden, but maybe not clear outside of the Nordic countries what these are about. So the common idea in both of these interventions is the same. They are based on the interaction and the relationship between the child and the adult or adults outside of the child's family network. The support person or the support family is a lay person or persons who is willing to spend time and to do nice things together with the child so they can act on voluntary base. That's kind of like the rough idea, but there is also some differences between these services. Firstly, in support person service, there is one adult who acts as a support person and meets the child like 2 to 4 times per month during the evening or day, few hours at a time. With this intervention, we can see references, especially in youth mentoring programs, which are usually or widely used in Anglo-American countries. And then about support family service. There, the whole family is providing the support for the child. And the idea in the support family is that the child spends usually once a month, a weekend, from Friday to Sunday in support family's home. And when finding references from outside of Finland and Nordic countries to support family intervention, we say that it's a form of respite care, and it can be called as support care, short-term fostering, regular breaks, for example, and respite foster care if you start searching for these interventions online or from articles. And then I would like to make a distinction, or what is the main thing how support family intervention differs from the support person service. And that is that the child does not sleep over in support person's home, and in support family service they do. So that's kind of like the rough distinction. But still continuing, that the volunteers are really a heterogeneous group, as you can be a support family if you are a single or as a couple, or if you have your own children, or if you don't. So either way, or many things that you can be, or your background can be really several. And the support persons and support families are recruited, evaluated, and trained, also supported by the social service professionals. So they get the support from the social services. And then how these families, how they get these support persons and support families. Families can apply those by themselves, or the initiative can be done by social services or other services that the family or the child is already receiving at a time. And the needs assessment is always done by the social worker, and they decide the need of this kind of provision. So, yeah, what else? Usually the duration of this relationship is from 1 to 4 years, but they can last longer as well. And I actually checked from our research that, as I said, these are really widely used interventions, and it means that, for example, what came out from our research, that approximately 3,700 Finnish children had a support family in year 2021, and over 1,800 child had a support person. So that's a really massive group of youngsters and children who are receiving this kind of a support. Does this give any idea of these interventions?
I was just before going to our second question, just a supplementary question. Maybe I mean I have a question that has two parts, but you can address them simultaneously or interconnectedly. Who are these children actually who need this kind of support? I mean, if they have problems like social problems or psychological problem, what kind of problem they have? And secondly, the person who is trained as a sport person, or the families who are trained as a sport family, who are the trainers? They are from certain discipline, or they are from interdisciplinary team?
Yes, excellent questions and marks. I will start from the who trains them. As I said, that all of these volunteers are recruited and trained and evaluated by the social service professionals. So it means that these professionals have a background in social work in large. Kind of like in a wide perspective. They can be social workers or they can be social service professionals in such. So they are from this this background. So that's the common way. And then you asked about the children, how or what are their backgrounds. These both services are provided for the children and families when families are having different psychosocial stressors. I would say that the common case, especially in support family intervention, is that there is a single parent with a lack of networks, and the parent is tired and exhausted. So with these family stressors, the support family is provided to bring the break, especially for the parent. And while the parent is getting the break, the child is having a new relationship outside of the family. But I'm sure I will clarify this a bit more when we also keep on discussing.
Yes, all right. So it means that these children are not without parents, they have parents.
Yes. Yeah. So they are living with their parents in their homes, and then there is and then they see this outside of a volunteer outside of their homes. So, but of course, these support persons and support families can also be provided for the children when they are already taken into custody and they are living in their custody families. So that's also one possibility, but mainly they are living with their parent or parents at their homes.
But who actually request or ask for these services, parents or children? Or I mean, how do you assess that these children need sport program?
Maybe we'll go to that with a question when I'm trying to conceptualize more how these where to place these services, because
we can move to that question, that how do you conceptualize these terms?
Yeah, because that's not kind of like a easy task to do as well, because as I said, these are really services that are kind of like widely used in Nordic countries. And as we know that our welfare societies kind of like work in a certain way, but both of these services in Finland are based on a law. So firstly, let's say it was in the beginning of the 1980s, both of these services came to our Child Welfare Act. So it meant that one of the means of child protection was taken in. So it was already evaluated that these children have so many stressors and difficulties in their life that they need this kind of intervention from child protection. And one of the services that can be given throughout this child protection law, the Child Welfare Act, is this support person and support family. So that's kind of like they are already being evaluated, the children that they need help, their families need help. And this is one service measure that is kind of like in there. But then in 2015, both of these services were also introduced in our Social Service Act, which meant that these children were not in need to be clients in child protection, but they had the right to get these support measures with lower threshold as part of universal social services in Finland. So this is really good thing as well. So you are allowed to get these kind of services even you don't have yet that many or big problems in the family or with the child. So it kind of like gives the boost already when so that things wouldn't get even worse in the family. So the stated aim of these services is to support families through so-called kind of like open care measures or in-home services. That's how we define them in child protection. And as I said already, that the basic idea of these interventions or services is that people with voluntary mandate, so they are lay persons with their common knowledge, they are delivering this public child welfare service or child protection service. So this actually means that ordinary people are acting as an intervention to children and families. And this is not a new thing in Nordic countries. For example, in Finland, these interventions have been used already from the 1940s. So after the war. So we actually have a really long tradition where laypersons are being used as support measure in child protection and child welfare. And I will still continue on this thing how we place these services in our system, because it can be a bit tricky to understand. The voluntary work of support persons and families can be kind of like regarded as a form of civic activity. It's based on a so-called contract between the volunteer, who is the support person or the family, and then there is the child with her parents. But however, the support persons and families, they also operate in public child welfare services. And in cooperation with social workers and possibly with other professionals as well. So involving these ordinary citizens as volunteers means kind of like the constitution of new social spaces, as for example, John Clark has stated. So it's not the easiest way of understanding it. There is kind of like it's kind of like this semi-public sphere, which is formed by both, we can see domestic, informal, private, and then there is this public and formal actors. And they kind of like challenge this public-private dichotomy that we have. and stretching the boundaries between the state and society. So this is where we kind of like place them. I also know that in Sweden, where these services are widely used, the discussion around it is to use a concept on voluntary social work, so frivilligt socialarbete. But in Finland, the discussion is not argumented in this way, and this kind of work that the voluntary-based people are doing, it's not seen as part of social work as such. It's a measure of social work, but the volunteers are not discussed to do social work. Is this?
Yeah, I mean, why the volunteers are not discussed as social work?
That's just a way that the discussion in Finland is. That it's kind of like we are seeing that the social work that's been done, it's done by professionals who are being educated to become social workers or social service professionals. And when there are volunteers who can be, or whose background can be anything, so in that sense, we are not seeing them as social workers, or that's not like the volunteer social work. So there is just, but that's how it's been seen in Sweden, and I think that kind of like discussion, it's really interesting, and maybe that should be.
And what would be the status of the sport person or sport family, because they are also not professionals, and
Yes, they are not, yeah, and they are not, and because of the kind of like the mandate of the volunteers is really heavy. So kind of like they have the opportunity to come in with their common knowledge, to get this small training, and throughout that give the support for the families. But they can also say that, okay, now I don't have time to do this anymore, and they can quit. So that's kind of like part of the mandate as well. So if we are talking them as a professionals, then they don't have this kind of like mandate to come and go in that sense, and do this kind of like volunteer work. So
but
yeah,
they are being paid for their work.
they are getting a small reimbursement. It's not an actual payment in such. So they get small reimbursement from the municipality, or so that's how it works. It's a small one, and usually kind of like it covers the costs that happens when they are seeing the child, for example, for the food or so forth. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's not like a pay.
Yeah, and their work is not considered as a social work.
Not as such. Yeah, they are part of social work, as they are. That's a service that is given for the families, but they are not social workers. Of course, they can also have a background from social work. If they're, for example, for myself, if I would like to be a support person, that could be possible as well. So then I would be then I would have a background in social work, but it's not needed. So anyone can kind of like.
Why these person who are working as sport person or sport family, why they will do this work? I mean, they have something on their mind. They want to do something good, or they want to earn some money, or what might be the motivations for them?
Yeah, well, it's also seen in Nordic countries that people are really willing to give their time for people in need. So that is something that is it's widely kind of like they want something meaningful in their lives. Any one of us wants. So that's one way of kind of like filling that gap. And if you feel that you have kind of like extra time and kind of like personal efforts to do that, then this is one option to kind of like give your personal time and be the adult for a child who needs that.
Oh yeah, great. Okay, so you are working on a relationship as well. So how do you explore the relationship between the child and the sport person or sport family?
Yes, yeah. First of all, I really must say that exploring almost everything in support person and support family interventions is valuable because the amount of research available is still relatively small. And this is unfortunate because both of these interventions, as I've been already saying, they are really common in Nordic countries. Yeah. Overall, these services have mostly been guided and developed by tacit knowledge by the professionals. So we really need to dig deeper and understand on these interventions. And in Finland, the first PhD on support persons came 2015. And as I said, these interventions have been there already after the 1940s. So it took a long time. And then 2 other dissertations on support family intervention came 2020. And one of them was my PhD. And that was an existential phenomenological research on children's experiences on support family service, but that's another story. But it comes to close with this relationship part as well. And why to explore the relationship between the child and the support person or family. As the key strategy in these interventions is to provide for the child a trusting and a safe relationship with adults outside the home and the family network that she's having. So this means that the relationship is important, or we can even say that it's in crucial role in these interventions. So how these how does this relationship and the interaction between the child and the adult is actually affecting for the child and bringing something good or extra for the child's life. So the new adults they are expected to offer the child a steady and reliable relationship and stimulation in different environments. And for this reason, the volunteers are also evaluated. So their backgrounds are checked and they've been interviewed that, okay, do you actually have time to do this kind of a volunteer work? So is the environment safe for the child? That's the work for the social worker to do. And as we know from other researches, this kind of a relationship where there is reliable adults around the children, they predict positive effects and changes in child's life. So it is really in an important role. But at this point, as we don't have research that much, we cannot say much about the actual effectiveness either of these interventions. And for that reason, more research is still needed. So that's the point. And what comes to this relationship, we still need to kind of like emphasize and explore the child's position in these interventions, because children and child is really in kind of like a crucial part of it. So only few studies in Nordic countries, including my PhD, have gathered this kind of like data where children's experiences of support family service is viewed, and the children are seen as an active actors. So they're seen that they have their personal own knowledge that we should take into account and value that as such. And this way we can kind of like also highlight the social worlds and the relationships between the adults and children, and kind of like make visible the challenges that there is also, which are related to how the child is positioned in these interventions. So yeah, as we can also see that in these interventions, kind of like the problematic part is that the child's positioning is actually kind of like under the adult's like a power. So the services is really determined by the adults. So this kind of like indicates that the children's involvement, both of these services should actually be strengthened. So that is something that we just need to keep on researching. But the crucial part is the relationship, and how does that work, and what kind of like support the volunteer also gets for it. So the matching is really in a crucial part, that the child who is in need gets the right kind of a volunteer as well. So there are like that their needs are seen together.
Yeah, okay, yeah, good. I mean, it is interesting to know that there is not much research done in this area, because it seems like you said it started from 1940, I think. You said perhaps 19...
Yes, yeah, that's the first kind of like it wasn't in 1940s. It wasn't like it is today. But there was like first initials on it. So children were, for example, they were sent out in families for summer to kind of like after the war in Finland, it was like really common that the children were having this kind of like a summer family where they spent the whole summer. They were children living in cities, and they were sent into countryside to kind of like see different kind of family life. So that was seen important. Yeah.
This reminds me of something. I mean, in global South or in South Asia, where we have extended families.
Yes.
Children go to spend their summer vacations to their relatives, grandparents, here and there, and it is also a type of multiple attachments.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And I think that this is kind of like the Nordic way of making these extended families, because we are kind of like a really individualized society, and even though we have networks from our families and so forth, but sometimes they are not working, or they are not enough. So for this reason, the kind of like the states comes between and helps the families also to find these new relationships outside of the family's own network.
All right. So now it comes with another question. When the children are having sport families, or they're in contact with sport person, they might build a sense of attachment with them, or sense of belongingness with them. So if it happens, what do you think, how the parents would react to it? They would see it a kind of that children are going to another family, or they think that it is a kind of still a sport or intervention for them?
Yes. The idea is that there will be an attachment between the support person or the support family. And I must say that both of these services are seen in a really positive way, also from the parents of the children and the children themselves, and from the viewpoint of the social services as well. And for that reason, this kind of service is also provided that much, because I think the idea is that the families or the parents of the children see it's kind of like it's easy to take this kind of like support, because there is another kind of like common person, a common family who I can send my family, who I can send my child to be with. So it doesn't make it that professional, and I think that's the reason why it's so kind of like seen in a positive light. But of course, I'm not saying that that the parents can feel kind of like jealous, for example, if there comes like a really good connection between the between the child and the volunteer, but I wouldn't say that it comes in between of the parent and the volunteer. But of course, multiple feelings might occur when this kind of like service is provided.
Anyhow, I mean, it is contributing to the child's social networking, and there are several occasions when child may not be very much comfortable in saying something, expressing something with his or her immediate parents, and they need some sort of external connections. So in that way, this is a good idea. And I mean, it is somehow you have theorized it in the context of Finland and also Nordic countries, but in global South or in other so-called non-Western contexts, I see it being implemented as non-formally or informally in families. People have extended families, even the neighbors sometimes they act
Yes.
as a sport family. So it is interesting. So how do you see this relationship that it is contributing for Finnish children social networking and social inclusion?
Yeah. As you were asking in the beginning, that who are these kind of like who are these children and what kind of needs they are having, and of course, as I said, they come with multiple backgrounds. There can be different problems or stressors in their lives. But the main thing is that kind of like it helps the adult or the parent, but also the child. So getting the parent is getting the break, and the child is having this kind of like new relationship outside of the family. About the relationship and kind of like this social networking. As my PhD showed, that the relationship between the child and the adult or the adults, that's not the only thing in the children's experiences that are meaningful when we are talking about now in support family intervention, what was my focus. But children's experiences showed that effective and this kind of like interactive relationship with adults in support family, they are essential, but relationships with support families' own children and also pets may play an important role. So the child may also develop an attachment relationship to the support family's physical environment, in addition to the relationship they are having with the support family itself. So there are different kinds of relationships that the child can create while having this kind of a service, and which in the end then hopefully also promotes the child's social inclusion and makes the network more wider one. So that's how it's important to pay attention to the relationship between the child and the adult, and it's also this kind of an intergenerational relationship that we need to kind of like focus and try to understand how it works and what are the key measures that make the intervention effective. Yeah, which actually kind of like means again that more research is needed. So my work continues.
Very interesting. And I think maybe if you will proceed further, just like you were doing in your postdoc, you can work on something like grounded theory to find more new theoretical perspective out of it.
Yes,
yeah. Great.
hopefully.
Yeah. Because the child is connected to person and also the environment. So child environment interaction and child person interaction, and then a triangulation of three. I mean, child person environment.
Yes.
So they are all contributing to the support system
Yeah.
intervention.
Yeah.
Great, very well. So we enjoy, I mean, in this talk, and I am sure that viewers will get something new out of it, because there are these are the concepts that are not too much into the global literature that parent can children, parent, or layman, they can get benefited.
Yeah.
How it works. And also, it's a good idea that in the countries in the West where the people are trying to, and the organizations are trying to work on child welfare, they may think what is the informal sports system in those countries and how they can be trained and formalized into a well-groomed sports system for children. Great. Thank you very much, Tiina. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
You also enjoy this talk.
That was nice.